All right, we're back here. Hang with Hester, presented by Richard Honda, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge, 11:30 a.m. The Tiger, and Cox Sports TV. Excited to welcome back to the show Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl now. Jim, how you doing?
I'm good, Jacob. How you doing?
Doing well. So we all know that the Senior Bowl is a big part of scouting. These NFL teams, they all come to Mobile. They watch the game. They watch the practices. They have the meetings, and it's always a very key piece. But I've got to imagine, Jim, with no pro days, you're feeling more questions than you've ever had before.
Yeah, that's certainly we are. We added group leaders this year. Well, actually last year, something we didn't have when you were in the game, Jacob. And these guys, kind of like they have at the combine. They're guys. We had a lot of former players come back this year and do it. And it's their job. I asked those guys to really pay attention to the guys during the week and how they handle their business. Not just on the field, but more importantly off the field. And we've had a lot of teams call and ask us how these guys were behind the scenes for us at the game, and who was a pain in the butt to wake up in the morning,
right,
and who was showing up late for meetings and all that good stuff. So yeah, there's certainly been a lot of that talk.
That's a key piece, and I don't think people realize that, Jim, that these NFL teams, when they're putting this much money in these prospects, they want to know that kind of detail. They want to know, okay, is he going to be a guy that shows up late and the vet has to get onto him? Is he going to be a guy that wakes up ready to go? He's setting everything up for the veteran player. I mean, that's something that goes a long way inside these buildings.
There's no doubt, and again, like you said, it's a multi-million-dollar investment in most cases. And when you really think about it, this pre-draft process is such a short time frame where you really get to know the players. That's where scouts come in. They're very valuable. They're going into places like Baton Rouge and, trying to develop relationships over a long period of years so you can get good information at the schools. But, you got like 3 months really to try to get to know the player and have that whole picture painted by draft day and really have a good feeling. So any little thing you can pick out that might be able to get you pointing in the right direction as a player is helpful. And as you know, that's a tough league. It's a tough lifestyle. And, a lot of times why guys make it or don't make it is because of that stuff, whether they're able to handle that daily grind of the league or not.
Hey, Jim, because of your history as a scout, I think you could provide unparalleled insight into a question that I have, which is with this NFL draft moving along at its original date, but the lack of the ability to go out and scout these players fully like you're talking about, how much of an impact do you think that will have on this year's draft? Like, how would you have felt if you were still scouting and all of a sudden you have to make these decisions without actually getting to scout these guys?
Well, that's a man that we could talk for a long time on that one. I do think, without trying to sound self-serving, I do think it helps the guys that came to the Senior Bowl and some of the other All-Star games and the Combine, because again, as many as exposures as you can give these teams, the better they get to know you and feel good about it. So I think some of the small school players are really getting squeezed this year. I think you'll see more seniors drafted than most years. A lot of these juniors flood the draft. I think teams are just going to try to play it a little more safe this year and pick the guys they're more familiar with. And again, it's the small school guys, it's the non-combine guys that maybe you felt good about them in the fall. Maybe they're a really good player on FCS level tape or Division II tape. But they didn't go to an all-star game. So you're looking at, how else can we measure them against what's playing in the National Football League? And one way to do that is with the testing data. And without a pro day, you don't have that information. So it's a little more of a throwing of the dart, if you will, by taking a small school or non-combine guy now. So that's why I think you're going to see some of those guys get to more undrafted free agency than years past.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask, if you thought there were going to be any impacts. I've heard people talk about the UDFA class maybe above and beyond. Something you touched on, the Jim, there, that because of these odd circumstances, if you went to the Senior Bowl, that ended up really playing out in your favor if you did the right things there. What do you think going forward? Do you think this kind of, like when you're sending out these invites next year, do you think there's going to be any extra incentive for these guys to maybe think twice before turning an invite down?
I hope so, but we're really in a pretty good place right now at the game. We only had 3 players decline our invites this year.
Oh, wow.
Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow and Derek Brown, which to me I understood. I wasn't mad at either of those guys. They pretty much solidified themselves as the best player at their position, so I get it. And then we had Trayvon Diggs, who's a corner at Alabama, declined us. So really only 3 players did. But again, I hope that is in the back of their mind, and not just for the Senior Bowl, and not because of the coronavirus. I mean, this is really uncharted territory for everyone. So we're not going to come across a pandemic every year, but I do think that there were some players, like take Trayvon Diggs for example. He declines the Senior Bowl invite. He goes to the combine and chooses not to work out, and now he doesn't have a pro day.
Yeah.
So he basically passed on 2 opportunities to put his best foot forward, and now he's not going to have a chance. So, I think the agents are making good notes of these things too, and they'll probably I would guess they'll give counsel next year, like, hey, if you got a chance to compete, go compete.
If you look at next year, are y'all in emergency kind of planning at all yet, or is that still so far out ahead where you feel like we can kind of bide our time and wait and see what develops?
I mean, I can't lie to you. My head's gone there. I mean, I sure hope we're past this as a world and as a nation where we can kind of resume our normal activities. But I don't know. If not, I don't know how it's going to impact it. I mean, people are already starting to talk about maybe an abbreviated football season, which even to me that seems so far off right now. Man, I hope that doesn't happen. But if it gets to a point where the college football season is suspended next year and everything gets lifted to, say, for example, theoretically in late October, November, maybe they wouldn't even have an abbreviated year. Maybe they just choose not to have a season, which in turn it might help the Senior Bowl. If I'm trying to think optimistically, then our game would be the one opportunity for these guys to put pads on and show themselves. So, man, I hate to think that way. I really try to be positive that we're going to get through this. But I know like everyone, we're all going through the what if scenarios.
Going back, and of course we're catching up with Jim Nagy, the executive director over at the Senior Bowl. Going back to the comment about guys not having 40s or workouts because they didn't work out in Indy, and Grant Delpit comes to mind. And we all know that 2018, he was an absolute force. He was a projected, maybe even top 5 pick if he was able to come out. Well, he has the ankle injury this year. He fights through it. He doesn't miss time. He set out 1 game, but he played through it. He played hurt most of the season, and we've seen his draft stock kind of go down, and he doesn't have that opportunity. He was waiting until his ankle got fully healthy. Now he doesn't have that opportunity. Is there anything that these guys can do? I mean, can they get a laser time somehow in a remote location, or do you think they're going to have to live with what they put on tape?
Well, for the most part, they're going to have to live with what they put on tape. I had some agents reach out to us a couple weeks ago about, getting together. There's some agencies that have 20, 30 players right now that haven't tested, and so they wanted to fly me out to Orange County, California to time their players just because they knew that I worked in the NFL for 20 years, almost 20 years, and so any times I got, the teams would see as valid times, and I just, to be completely honest, my wife wasn't real fired up about me getting on a plane and going anywhere, so that's where we kind of tried to be creative. We did do the Senior Bowl. We put together an instructional video on how to conduct a pro day, and not only conduct a pro day, we did also how to film one. Like where to position cameras, So, and we've already gotten some. We posted that to our website a week ago Saturday, and we've already had, probably 6 or 7 agencies and schools reach out and say that they've kind of followed this thing to a T, and now they've gotten those videos off to the NFL teams. And,
nice.
At the very minimum, even if they can't get a really accurate 40 time, they should be able to get accurate stuff on all the jumps and all the shuttles. And to me, that's going to suffice for a lot of these small school kids. If you're a FCS level player, say wide receiver, for example, and you pop a 40-inch vertical jump and a 10-6 broad jump and a 4.05 short shuttle. Well, those numbers right there, are really competitive with some of the best guys in the NFL. So why wouldn't you maybe take a shot on that guy in the 6th or 7th round? So hopefully this video helps, but that's really we really racked our brains and tried to be creative, and we figured that's really the only thing we could do to help out in these tough times.
I think a lot of people kind of forget too that these NFL teams, even at the combine where they have this electric time, they still like to have their stopwatch and see what they get them because they do trust their scouts. I can remember after I ran the 40, different teams had me at different times, and so
who's got that quick clock?
It's not who's got the quickest clock, but it's not always about the laser time there at the combine. I mean, these people trust their scouts, and so something like you're talking about, if it's someone that they can trust, I mean, they'll take value in that.
Yeah, and again, Jacob, it's because it's great to have the laser time because then you can go back over time at Indianapolis and compare those guys. All this is about comparing players and throwing them into a database and see what the numbers show. But you can't, even at the Alabamas and LSUs and Clemsons of the world, they don't have great laser timing. So you have to have hand times to compare to the smaller school guys. So that's why you go to Indy and the scouts get their own time. So then when a kid at McNeese State or Nicholls State or somewhere runs a 4.4 for your scout, it's the same 4.4 that he timed at the combine.
Yeah, I mean, look, if LSU had a bit of laser time, I'd have been a 4.9. I don't know how 5.3. I mean, that was just like, that was crazy. Talking to Jim Nagy, Executive Director of the Senior Bowl here on Hanging with Hester. Good to put your scout hat back on, Jim. The draft's coming up. When you were evaluating players, what was your process for balancing like testing versus personality and interviews and meetings versus the actual game film?
That's a good question. People always ask to put percentages on that stuff. I mean, to me, the majority of your evaluation should be that fall tape.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you bring up Grant Delpit. That's a great example. Like I'm seeing him getting, beat up a little bit on social media and in the media world. Well, when you're with a team, that medical history and that the guy's fighting through an injury. So, you're going to look at that tape differently. I mean,
Yep.
You're factoring the guy that's toughing it out and going out to battle with his teammates. I mean, to me, the tape might not be quite as good as 18, but he was out there, at least playing through injury, which you guys know you're going to have to do at the next level. But it all plays a piece. I think the fall tape is a huge part. I think the All-Star games is another huge part because it's best on best from around the country. And then the teams that I've worked for, where we made the most mistakes looking back on it was a lot of the stuff from pro days and combines. I mean, those things serve a purpose. The combine's great to get the medical information, go through a lot of interviews. But when you get too much into the testing stuff, it can kind of take your mind away from what the tape actually looked like.
Yeah.
So, it's really a checks and balances. Maybe a guy runs significantly faster or significantly slower than he looked on tape, and maybe it forces you to go back to the tape. But to me, it's a combination of the fall tape, the All-Star game, and like you said, the personality and like the makeup of the guy and how he's wired and where he came from. And again, going back to the thing, how difficult that league is. I mean, you need guys that have gone through adversity. You need tough-minded guys. You need responsible guys and mature guys. So, the person, like I always say that teams miss more on the player, or they miss more on the person than they miss on the player. Watching the tape is the easier part. Figuring out what a young man's going to do when he's got millions of dollars at his disposal and a lot more time than he had in college.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's the trickier part, especially because you get so limited opportunities to get to know these guys.
Jim, you are the man. I appreciate your time. One of the best in the business. Been a scout for a long time, so I appreciate your perspective here on what we're kind of all going through, talking NFL draft and not really knowing, how these teams are going to scout players. So I appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me on, Jacob. Love coming on anytime.
All right, there
Thanks,
he is,
Jim.
Jim Nagy, Executive Director over there at the Senior Bowl.